Hey folks, check this shit out. They finally made Sliced Bread 2, the best thing since... well, I don't know when. There's only one problem with it. The depth could have been a bit better. I like playing fun video games on my Nintendo Switch video game console. The first game I ever played on it was a quirky little hidden gem called The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and it was so much fun! With engaging gameplay and an expansive, engrossing world to get lost in, I sunk so much time into that game. I played it pretty much every spare moment I had, which was pretty impressive on the game's part considering this was at the onset of my zero attention span era. Point is, Breath of the Wild was an incredible game, but at the same time it showed so much potential for the enhancement and expansion of its core formula. So imagine the amazing fanfare when at E3 2019 Nintendo announced that a sequel to Breath of the Wild was in development. Just by the nature of it being a sequel to Breath of the Wild, this then unnamed game attracted a ton of much-deserved hype. And it sure did make a splash when it finally released. Eventually. I think Nintendo fans are kinda used to this at this point. Really great games take a really great long time to be finished, so it's not uncommon to see long development times and numerous delays in Nintendo's big-budget first-party releases. But it wasn't a huge issue in this case. There were plenty of games to play in the meantime, and it was clear that Nintendo was using all that time to make this game something truly special. And something truly special it certainly was, as in the 2 months since its released, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has taken up a substantial chunk of my time and still continues to amaze me. I'm still not quite finished with it, but I think I am far enough along to share a relatively fully formed opinion. Unless it just starts to get really bad after the first 60 hours. So, what's my ultimate verdict on the game based on what I've played? Yeah, I like it. Which is a damn shame, because do you know how much attention I could have gotten if I didn't like it? I don't know, what is there really to say about this game that hasn't already been said? Tears of the Kingdom is terrific, wonderful, a masterpiece in every sense of the word. Every minute of this game has been well and truly a blast. It's pure immersive fun. But why not spend some precious minutes of my life dissecting exactly why I find this game so wonderful based on the experiences I've had so far? The game opens with this tense spelunking sequence alongside Zelda, which then leads into a cutscene where we meet this guy who makes red glowy stuff destroy everything, and then we wake up with a prosthetic arm and finally adventure awaits us. The Great Sky Island is the name of this place, and this is where we get to grips with some of the game's core mechanics before we get sent off on our own. It's a pretty solid intro and tutorial overall, but what's really solid is at the end of the Great Sky Island we reach this ledge and... Whoa. One of my first experiences after landing on the surface below was walking for like 3 minutes and then... What the heck? With absolutely no warning, I just get obliterated by a really dangerous enemy that I had no clue existed and that the game did not prepare me for. In some cases, this might be a cause for complaint, but I think it works here, and it's honestly a big highlight of the game for me. It's really emblematic of how Tears of the Kingdom just lets you run absolutely hog wild. Your adventure is not bound by any set lines of progression. You can do literally whatever you want. There are of course key locations to visit as part of the story, but it's all totally optional and you can do anything in any order or not at all. You have total freedom to go about and explore this expansive world, finding both cool things and dangerous things that you weren't quite ready for. This freedom that the game offers enables each player to form their own unique experience with the game. Everyone is going to discover things at different times and in different ways and have different reactions to them. No two players will experience this game in the exact same way, which helps make the adventure feel really your own and makes the experience that much more immersive. For me personally, my experience has just been wandering around towards whatever the hell catches my eye at any given moment and seeing what I find. I have been to places that are critical for the story when there's nothing else that interests me, but I've consistently found a lot of random interesting stuff along the way, which in turn leads me to more interesting stuff, which makes the gameplay experience a beautiful cascade of infinite distractions. There's just so much dicking around to do in this game, and I think it's a really critical factor in the gameplay experience. It ties in with the element of freedom in an open world. There's so much game to get completely lost in and mess around with as you see fit. But what exactly is this interesting stuff that Tears of the Kingdom distracts us with? Well, giant flaming penis mechs for one. But the giant flaming penis mech is built off of a lot of different components of the gameplay, so we have to get through those first. Well, on a very basic level, this game has movement and combat. In this game, you can walk and jump, which is just dandy, but more importantly, you can fight enemies. The combat system is largely unchanged from Breath of the Wild, and it's still really solid and fun. It's exciting to try to perfectly time a dodge from an attack to get the slow-mo flurry rush and trying to find the perfect opportunities to block with your shield and go for an attack on an enemy. It's good old-fashioned Zelda combat where you swing a sword at enemies, and it's pretty darn good. Beyond the combat, this game also offers a couple abilities that can help you fight enemies and navigate the world. One such ability is the Ultra Hand, which allows you to manipulate various overworld objects and, crucially, fuse them together to create all sorts of doohickeys and thingamabobs. Exhibit A. A crucial building block for various Ultra Hand monstrosities is something called the Zonai devices, which are entirely new to this game and have a variety of functions in the overworld. In a lot of cases, the game will provide you with the tools that you need to solve a puzzle or clear a certain obstacle. But you can also bring your own Zonai devices wherever you want and use them to make whatever you want. And they all work together so intuitively. When you fuse stuff together, all the activatable parts of it work in tandem pretty much exactly how you would expect them to. With a mechanic as novel and complicated as this, I would be surprised if there weren't a decent amount of jank involved. But no, everything just works. The game just knows exactly what you're trying to do with your contraptions, which makes screwing around with them so much more compelling and rewarding. They're pretty simple on the surface, and if you just want to use them for their basic functions when it's necessary, that's totally an option. But if you really want to push them to their limits and make something really cool, they're complex enough to offer a deep experience to anyone who wants to experiment with them. Whether you're using them to solve a puzzle or to just mess around, they provide infinite options for stretching your creativity, and it's so much fun. Another wonderful ability that this game introduces is the power to fuse. You can combine weapons and shields with various items, overworld objects, Zonai devices, and even other weapons to increase their power and give them some unique effects. Like, did you know you can make an explosive barrel sword? It's awesome. You can combine two spears to make a long-ass spear. You can make a fire spear powered by fruit. You can combine a shield with a Zonai rocket to make a literal jetpack, and you can fuse arrows with a variety of items to make fire, ice, electric, and even explosive arrows. It's another great way to exercise creativity and explore the variety of options for weapons that the game has on offer. There's also the recall mechanic, which lets you reverse the movement of various overworld objects. This ability feels a little more niche in my opinion, as I haven't come across a ton of opportunities to use it, but it's still a well-designed mechanic and it opens up a lot more options for navigating the overworld. Another helpful navigation tool is the Ascend ability, which allows you to phase through surfaces above you and come out the other side. Honestly, I'm kinda surprised at how not overpowered this is. You'd think that being able to just go right through the ceiling would allow you to bypass a lot of the game's challenges, but the game handles it incredibly well. The design of the game's world accommodates this ability perfectly, limiting its usage enough to where it feels fulfilling when you do use it without having it just break everything. A lot of the time there are no surfaces for you to phase through that would actually help you clear a puzzle, and in a lot of places in the overworld where you can ascend through stuff, there isn't really much reason to, as there's much more to be found in any given place that you're exploring. Overall, it's pretty enjoyable to mess around with, and it makes for another engine of creativity as you go about the game. One of the main interesting things that you'll find scattered about the overworld is the shrines, which were big in Breath of the Wild and are just as important here. They serve as a long set of mini-dungeons that contain a variety of challenges to test your creativity and knowledge of the game's mechanics. A good chunk of them are puzzle-based and require effective use of abilities like Ascend and the Ultra Hand, but some of them are based on combat, oftentimes taking away all your equipment to put you out of your comfort zone and test your baseline skills with various elements of the game's combat system. I definitely prefer the puzzles over the combat challenges, but they can still be a nice change of pace sometimes. Overall, the shrines are excellently designed and make for very fun and engaging challenges that are really satisfying to overcome. Another interesting thing about the shrines is that they have a slightly different design on the outside from those in Breath of the Wild. In that game, you walked in and it was just an elevator that took you to a loading screen before entering the main area. In this game, there's just an opening that directly connects the inner shrine with the overworld, which is a really nice touch. There's still a loading screen, goddammit. I still think it's a little cooler visually than what Breath of the Wild shrines had, but man, don't tease me like that. In addition to the shrines, this game also has a couple traditional big boy dungeons. The classic dungeons that have been a Zelda series mainstay forever were weirdly absent from Breath of the Wild, which was frustrating to quite a number of fans. But then what the hell do you call the Divine Beasts? I don't know, I personally didn't really feel like the classic big dungeon gameplay was really missing from Breath of the Wild, as it seemed to me that the Divine Beasts were meant to be the dungeons of the game. They're large labyrinthine areas that require you to solve a variety of puzzles and then fight a boss at the end. Sounds like a dungeon to me. That said, they are still fairly different from your typical dungeon, as they're far more based around the physical manipulation of the dungeon itself rather than using a particular item or ability to navigate through various puzzles. And beyond that, these just look depressing, man. Zelda dungeons normally have distinct visual and environmental themes that make them all stand out. In Breath of the Wild, it's all the same beige-ass blocky mess in all 4 Divine Beast dungeons. Granted, they definitely have differences, but the general aesthetic is the same, which is made worse by the fact that the general aesthetic isn't very fun to look at. Overall, I don't remember the Divine Beasts being bad, but I also don't really remember them. They all had similar visuals, of course, and they also had very similar bosses, all being something Blight Ganon, all looking pretty much the same, with the fights not feeling all too different from each other mechanics-wise. And the puzzles in each dungeon were also really similar, although the way that you manipulated the dungeon structure varied with each divine beast, the general experience was still the same, just constantly dicking around with the map and trying to move things around to the right places. The divine beast dungeons were fine, but just kind of forgettable and not quite as fun as other dungeons in the series. Tears of the Kingdom definitely did a much better job with its dungeons. They all have distinct themes with visually and mechanically unique structures. They also follow the more traditional puzzle formula, being based off a new ability derived from your companions. You get to keep those companion abilities permanently after beating the dungeon, but in general I've found that they're only mildly helpful in the overworld, and most of their utility comes from being fun puzzle-solving tools in the dungeons themselves. Regardless, the dungeons test your skills with these new abilities in creative and challenging ways, while also testing your general skills in combat and puzzle solving. It makes the dungeons unique and engaging without them feeling too different from the rest of the game. The bosses are also fairly solid, definitely more unique than the Blight Ganons from Breath of the Wild, but I feel like sometimes they put a little too much emphasis on using the companion abilities, which again are fine, but not that enjoyable to use in a boss fight compared to the regular combat. The bosses certainly aren't bad though, and they're still a decent amount of fun to fight, but I think they would have been a little better if they were more based around the game's core combat system. All in all, I think the dungeons are pretty darn good in this game. They're really creative in their designs, and they surface fun challenges both puzzle-wise and combat-wise. In addition to the main overworld of Hyrule, this game has the notable addition of the Sky Islands. Yeah, this game has an entire extra layer of world beyond the overworld. Kinda. The sky doesn't have nearly as much going on in it compared to the overworld on account of it being, well, islands in the sky, but they're still quite enjoyable to traverse, and I really enjoy the extra challenge they provide by forcing you to get creative with how you navigate them and move from island to island. And beyond that, it's so cool to just be up here. It's awesome to just gaze out into the land of Hyrule and dive back down to the overworld from such an insane height. Could there have been a bit more stuff to do up here? Probably, but the Sky Islands are still incredibly cool, and the atmosphere of them is a great experience in and of itself. Not only are there Sky Islands, there's also the exact opposite, the depths. That's right, there's another entire extra layer of world beyond the overworld, this time deep underground. You enter through these totally bizarre looking red and black pits, which are sorta creepy looking but also pretty cool. It's a pretty freaky experience to jump down into the deep for the first time, plunging yourself into darkness totally unsure of what you might find. For the most part, it's pretty hard to see down here, which tends to happen when you have no sunlight. And so you have to rely on this item called the Bright Bloom Seed to light up the area. You can place them on the ground and hit them with a weapon to activate them, or you can fuse them with an arrow and shoot them somewhere. I think they're a neat concept, but it can get kind of annoying to constantly have to place them on the ground and swing at them every 50 feet, and while the arrow fusing method is faster, it's still kind of annoying in its own right, and it of course uses up a lot of arrows, which are really important to have a good supply of. At the very least, I've never had much trouble with my supply of Bright Bloom Seeds. They're pretty easy to find throughout the game, and I've always been able to light my way through the depths when I need to. Fortunately, there is an alternative way to light up the depths, that being the light roots, which once found and activated, light up a large portion of the surrounding area and become a fast travel point like the shrines. They don't solve the problem completely, as you still have to fumble your stupid ass around in the dark if you venture too far away, but they are at least useful as places for you to pause and get your bearings while you're spelunking. But what exactly is there to spelunk in the depths? Goo, mostly. The depths are packed to the brim with this garbage called gloom, which if you touch it will take a semi-permanent chunk out of your health bar, limiting the total health you can heal up to until you visit a light route, use a certain type of food item, or return to the overworld. They aren't too troublesome to deal with, serving more as a way to restrict your movement rather than actively killing you. But it is kind of a bummer that the depths feel so big and expansive when in reality your exploration is severely curtailed by miles and miles of muck. Beyond that, the depths from my experience are mostly populated with clumps of enemies that also deal gloom damage, and you can defeat them to harvest ore and loot from their bases. There's also some mines where you can exchange an item called Zonite for crystallized charges, an item that you need to upgrade the battery life of Zonite devices, but that's about it. One other thing about the depths is that for the most part, save for a few spots where you can ascend back to the surface, the only way to return to the overworld is via fast travel. It's not really a big deal at all, but it does disrupt the cohesion of the game's world a little bit, as it makes the depths feel somewhat disconnected from the rest of the game. In general, the depths are fine, but I never found them to be that compelling. I feel like they're kinda lacking in particularly unique, fun stuff to do, being mainly just a slog through darkness, gloom, and enemy bases. The depths are certainly a creative idea, and they're still fun as far as the game's core gameplay is fun, but they're just not my favorite part of the game. Overall, Tears of the Kingdom is quite fun. Go figure. It's an experience that truly sucks you in. It's so easy to just get lost in the game's vast world, doing whatever you want and exploring whatever piques your interest at any given moment. It teases your curiosity and rewards you for being curious, and it has superbly designed gameplay to make the experience enjoyable all the way through. Most importantly, it offers total, absolute freedom and instills in the player a sense of adventure and creativity and experimentation. This game allows me to fuck around like I've never fucked before. And I've never fucked before. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is a good game, and I enjoy playing it. I like it almost as much as I like the sliced bread. I mean, this expired 2 months ago. I wonder if they made a sequel to Hospitals yet.